This is the infamous Festool Domino that comes with a gut-punching price tag of $1,200. But this is the brand new JSM Pocket Mill Pro that appears to do everything its more expensive cousin can at a fraction of the price. So does the Domino finally have some real competition? It's time to find out. Let's get this out of the way right now. I asked JSM to send me this because I was so intrigued, but with no strings attached. They wanted to pay me. I declined because I believe a review should be unbiased. In fact, my relationship with JSM started because they once emailed me saying, "We know you will tell us if you hate it," which I greatly appreciate. So one last time for the people at home, this is not sponsored. Anything I don't like, I'll tell you. Like these less than stellar assembly instructions. I mean, come on, can we at least get color photos? If you are at all familiar with JSM, you know about their quality standards. They don't make cheap looking or feeling products. The Pocket Mill is absolutely no different. It's substantial in your hand. And for the purists, it's machined in Canada out of anodized aluminum and stainless steel. Unlike the Domino though, you don't get the sustainer for storage. You can decide if that's important to you or not, but I happen to like my sustainers. This is the optional workstation that utilizes the micro-jig match fit system, which you know I'm a fan of if you've ever watched my channel. Yes, that's an added cost. Don't worry, we're gonna break all this down later. I wanna show you how this whole thing works first. There are a lot of differences between a Festool Domino and this Pocket Mill Pro. For starters, the mortise to accept the loose tenon is not actually cut. No, it's drilled. So unlike the Domino or the Domino knockoffs that use a router, your drill will be the star of the show. This is a carbide end mill attached to a custom designed stainless steel drill extension. Once your piece is lined up, the drill bit is inserted into these bearings, and then the magic happens. JSM developed a step-down process that allows the jig to lower 50 thousandths of an inch after each side-to-side pass, until the desired depth is hit. Okay, I bet at this point you have so many questions, and so did my Instagram followers when I teased this recently. So let me do my best to cover everything I possibly can. For instance,
it looks complicated. How do you set it up?
Like a Domino or dowels, I start with marking layouts on the workpieces. But a minor disadvantage in this application is that line doesn't do you any good, and it needs to be transferred down along the edge or end grain. Not a huge deal, it's just part of the process. You also need to strike a line horizontally to set the proper distance for the center line of the mortise. With a Domino, that's as easy as adjusting the fence height on the machine. These are parts for a chair frame I'm building, and I want extra strength, so I'm doing 2 rows of mortises and need to strike a second line. This gives me center points for alignment. You'll see why in a moment, but those horizontal lines only need to be marked on one piece. I can bring this over to the workstation and get everything lined up for the top row of mortises using these guides. Clamp it all in place while making sure the face of the workpiece is flush with the bottom of the jig. Pull this mechanism forward and then lock it into place. I already have my side guides adjusted to cut a tight-fitting mortise and the depth set to cut just barely deeper than 15 millimeters, which is half the length of this 30 millimeter tenon. Don't worry, I'll show you how to adjust all of this later and let you know if it's a pain or not. You will want your bit spinning as fast as possible, so crank that sucker all the way up. Connect your vacuum, and ironically, this perfectly fits a Festool hose. Now it's as easy as popping your drill into place and doing the side-to-side shimmy. I found the key is to go a little slow during the first few passes as the end mill enters the workpiece. This will leave the cleanest cut, but once you're in, have at it and don't feel like you need to finesse the jig. Once the guide bottoms out, remove the drill, hit this really fun button to reset everything for later, and your mortise is cut. So what about the fit? Again, I have mine set to a tighter cut for the width. I can get this even closer, but for what I'm doing, that's just not necessary. If you've used a Domino, you know how snug a tenon can be in the mortise. In fact, they are so tight that I often find myself using pliers to remove them during a dry fit, even after sanding off the side ridges. The JSM is really good, but definitely not as tight as the Domino at the top of the mortise. But towards the bottom, it's nice and snug with no play. I'm guessing this has to do with deflection as the end mill enters the workpiece. But the real test is, does it keep these two surfaces perfectly flush? And so far, I'm not finding any issues. And remember, the tenons will also swell once wood glue is applied. All right, I have all the tighter fits done for these leg pieces. Time to draw out some wider mortises for the opposing sides. This is one of the major advantages floating mortise and tenon have over dowels or the beadlock system. You don't need to be dead-on accurate when referencing your lines during the cut, because the extra width in the mortise gives you horizontal adjustability during assembly. Does the joint lose a bit of strength? Potentially, but there's still plenty of long grain surface area making contact. If you misfire with the dowels or beadlock, your joint will be all out of whack. To change the width of the mortise, use the supplied Allen key and adjust these horizontal stops. I know from playing around with the pocket mill that just flush with the inside of this face is a mildly sloppy fit. Personally, it's nitpicky, but I do wish JSM had created a toolless adjustment with milled stops at 3 nominal dimensions like the Domino. That feels like a bit of a miss. Now that your jig is set to this position, you can rinse and repeat by simply lining up your vertical line for the next mortise. Clamp the workpiece down and you're back to drilling. At this point, you might be asking,
can this actually do anything a Domino can't?
If you spend more than 10 minutes on YouTube, I'm guessing you've heard content creators justify the use of this tool by saying something along the lines of,
don't worry if you don't have a Domino,
because you could do the exact same thing with dowels or screws.
And yes, maybe that helps us sleep better at night, but the truth is there are certain instances when a Domino can perform tasks others simply can't.
Try doing this with screws or dowels.
Okay, not exactly what I was talking about, but the Domino is considered the gold standard for floating mortise and tenon, not because of speed, but because of versatility. Also, a biscuit joiner is not a suitable replacement. This is not a video explaining why. You do your own research if you have questions. That was a lot of words and cameos to simply tell you, no, the pocket mill can't do everything a Domino can.
Yeah, but can the pocket mill even do miters?
Good question. Let me be the first to say, I don't use my Domino on angled pieces very often at all. But if you want to do something like a waterfall mitered edge for a coffee table and give it the extra strength of mortise and tenon, the fastest and easiest way for you to do that is with this tool. For all the traditionalists, I don't care about routers or anything hand cut, just go watch another video and leave me alone. When you purchase this workstation for an extra $120, your Pocket Mill Pro can do the same thing with angles from 0 to 45 degrees. You simply loosen these hold downs, adjust the miter attachment to your desired angle, and the cutting, or I guess drilling operation, is exactly the same as before. But this brings us to an interesting point.
Can you talk about the workflow?
Beginner woodworkers learn early on the idea of bringing a tool to the workpiece versus bringing a workpiece to the tool. For instance, you take smaller pieces of wood to a table saw to cut to size. But for a larger sheet of plywood, it's safer and more accurate to take a track or circular saw to the piece and break it down. Same idea applies to the Domino. When you need to cut a bunch of mortises into big heavy boards for a tabletop glue up, grab your machine and start plunging without having to move the workpiece. It's fast and easy. This jig can go mobile using the angle attachment that comes standard with the basic Pocket Mill Pro. Then you can start to replicate the same scenario I described with the Domino, but it's not going to be as fast. Don't worry, I'll have a side-by-side speed test later. But it can also easily be clamped to the edge of your workbench and used just like the workstation. In my limited testing, I found the workflow of the JSM is actually more reliable than the Festool in a couple specific instances. When working on small parts with a Domino, things can get sketchy. There just isn't a lot of room to hold everything securely, unless you purchase an accessory like this Domino dock for an extra $65. Additionally, when working with thinner material like these chair arms, it can be challenging to keep the Domino perpendicular to the workpiece because it wants to tip as you apply pressure to the top plate. When that happens, like it did on the top two mortises here, you can see what it does to the alignment of these faces, and that's no good. The Pocket Mill Pro, well, yes, a touch slower, absolutely shines for smaller and thin parts because you can clamp everything nice and secure to the jig and nothing will tip while doing your side-to-side shimmy. Overall, it's a nice and unexpected advantage. So again, think about what you mostly build. Let's bring the Domino back to a workpiece and talk about mortises in the center of a board. Another situation where the Domino absolutely shines. Without adjusting the fence, you can secure a shelf in the middle of a carcass in under 1 minute. Can the Pocket Mill Pro even do that? Short answer, yes, but you do need another jig. JSM will be selling this as an add-on, but remember, you should factor this into the purchase price if it's a requirement for your needs. The smaller panel shown here can cut into the center boards up to 8.5 inches wide, and the larger panel up to 34.5 inches wide. The process is reasonably easy. Figure out the center line for your mortises, and then I would use something like a straight edge to keep it perpendicular and cut away. Then bring your shelves back over to the workstation or side of your bench and cut the mating pieces. Now for me, I can count on one hand the number of times I've done this in 3 years owning a Domino. Remember, we're all different. One of my favorite features of the DF500 are the stops on the sides of the cutter. If you're unfamiliar, these provide exact references without needing to measure and mark. If I'm being honest, using these stops is the only time I feel really good about getting a joint to line up perfectly, because there is occasionally human error when marking and referencing a line with the sights. Good news, and I'm sure a lot of other people will think of better solutions for the Pocket Mill Pro, but my initial thought, if I need to cut a bunch of pieces with the same mortise location and didn't want to measure like with a Domino, Simply setting up a stop block on the side of the jig will get you the same result. Let's rapid fire some additional questions before I let you know if this is a buy or sell situation. If you already made up your mind and don't care what I have to say, there's a link in the description below that will get you 10% off and free shipping through the end of March. Just enter promo code POCKETMILL at checkout. Are the drill bits metric or imperial? Now the jig comes standard with a 6mm end mill. Other sizes available for purchase are 5, 8, and 10 millimeters. Additionally, 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch for the imperial folks. Those range in prices from $44 to $86, whereas the Domino cutters are all around $54 for the comparable sizes. The main difference is the Festool are carbide tipped and the GSM are all carbide, so theoretically it should last longer and it's unlikely you ever need to replace one. What about the depth of cut? The PocketMill Pro has a max depth of 26.5 millimeters and the DF500 has a max depth of 28 millimeters. For the people at home who prefer a complicated and outdated standard of measurement like me, that's right around 1 1/32 of an inch and 1 1/16 of an inch respectively. Time difference between the two machines. These are both sped up so you don't need to sit through the full experience. The first series of cuts are 4 mortises on the tight setting, and the Domino got it done in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The PocketMill, 3 minutes and 15 seconds. But rather than show you best case scenario for the PocketMill, let's cover worst case, because now I need to adjust the jig for a wider cut. The Domino is as simple as a flick of the dial and back to work. The PocketMill requires the Allen key, and once it was all said and done, the Domino took 45 seconds on the last round for a grand total of 2 minutes to cut all 6 mortises. And the PocketMill Pro an additional 2:05 for a grand total of 5 minutes and 20 seconds. With a real-world example like these chairs, you're looking at a difference of 6 to 7 minutes of extra work per frame. Now, you make your own determination if that's a big deal or not in the grand scheme of a project. What does it actually cost? The basic PocketMill Pro with one cutter comes in at $349.99. If you add the workstation, which includes the miter attachment, that brings the price to $469. The Domino DF500 joiner has an opening price tag of $1,199. Now, neither come with tenons. You're on the hook for buying your own or making them. I'm sorry, it's not a cheap hobby. Can I just use a router? Of course. David Picciuto and Brad Rodriguez recently published videos breaking down router jigs, but they do have some major limitations that the PocketMill Pro doesn't. I'll leave links to those videos below. Personally, I avoid using routers at all costs because I just don't like them, and I really wasn't a fan of how exposed the bits were when those two showcased them being used. Should I just wait for the Domino patent to expire? Best case scenario, the Domino patent potentially ends at the end of 2024, early 2025. Now, I've asked privately, but even the people who work at Festool can't really tell you because there is a lot of smoke and mirrors. Worst case scenario, the fine folks in Germany have been making improvements to the design and have filed additional patents, which happens all the time and would mean it will be years before there are competitor Dominoes out on the market. Point being, don't listen to the internet, no one confidently knows. Do you need the workstation? If you do not have a big workbench with a vise or clamping abilities like this one on the side, you might struggle with the $350 basic unit. Or if you want to make a lot of miter cuts, the workstation is a must. What I do find a bit confusing is you lose this angled attachment when upgrading from the basic unit to the workstation. Now, it's not a deal breaker, it's more annoying and quite frankly seems a bit unfair. Is it worth it? Let's make a couple things very clear. This is not an item targeted at professionals or anyone that wants to get rich selling their work. In fact, I'm not even sure why those people watch this type of content, but I digress. However, if you're a home hobbyist or occasionally sell your work to fund a tool addiction and can't stomach the $1,200 price tag of the Domino, this might be more palatable. Now, I can already feel the comment section heating up, especially from the Festool owners saying, just save your money and get the Domino, you won't regret it. And they're right. Very few people regret buying a Domino if they have the means. But think of it from this perspective. At a savings of $700 or $850 if you opt for the basic jig, it leaves a lot of budget for another more important purchase, like a DeWalt planer or a new table saw, two tools you will use infinitely more than a Domino. I remember it like it was yesterday when I learned that you could secure 2 boards together using only a drill with pocket holes. It was empowering as a beginner woodworker. Now, I'm not saying this is a one-for-one existential experience, but the idea of being able to create a completely hidden joint, like a mortise and tenon, with something as accessible and safe as a drill, it's encouraging for our craft. And if you want to tell me the art of woodworking is dying because no one knows how to cut traditional joints without modern tools, I quite frankly don't care. Go ask the Egyptians if they would like a pyramid do-over with the assistance of modern-day cranes. Look, you won't be disappointed with the versatility of this jig. I already own a Domino, but I can see myself opting for the Pocket Mill Pro in certain situations going forward. If I were at a different stage in my woodworking career, I would no doubt purchase this without much hesitation. Again, none of this was sponsored. It's just my own thoughts. We'll see ya.